So Samson, tell me a little bit about how you got into growing and how you sort of began your relationship with the cannabis plant.
Well, that's a tough one. I was 1979, and weed was hard to get as a 10-year-old. So, as soon as I smoked weed for the first time, I got some seeds and started growing at the same time. Uh, my first crop was substantial, though I ended up losing it, and just seeing the potential from there and my genuine love of weed, at that point, really kind of pushed the whole thing forward. So, from there, it was just something I did from there on.
So you basically you've been growing for almost 40 years now. You're saying
37 years.
37 years. Wow. I mean, that's an incredible perspective to have. Can you tell me some of the things that have changed in growing since you started?
Oh, well, yeah, grow shops for one. Back in the day, there was no such thing as grow shops, and the selection at Lowe's was, almost non-existent. Or actually, I guess it was Heckinger back in the day we were going to get stuff. And, people were looking at you funny when you were grabbing things out of there. So, that's changed a lot. I mean, there was genuine fear about just buying supplies that, people were going to find out who you were in your car or be recognized, because towns were typically a lot smaller than the ones I were living in certainly were. So, we have a lot more freedom and a lot better products, but it also helped me in a lot of ways because all the things I wanted didn't exist, so I had to go make them. So, I really came up with a lot of things outside the box because I didn't even know what the box was because we were so isolated from it on the East Coast. I mean, there was some of that stuff on the West Coast, but absolutely nothing on the East Coast. It was just out of the question. I grew up in Virginia, and it was. They're still terrible about it there.
So when you started, I'm guessing that there really wasn't much in the way of indoor cultivation. So you must have started outdoor.
Yes, I didn't hear anything about indoor until probably the mid '80s. That's about the time skunk hit the scene. Before that, it was all just Mexican weed. And I would say by the late '80s, the Phototron, which was the original grow device for in-home, had come out, and it touted a quarter pound every 90 days, which was pretty good back then, and it wasn't brown weed, so it was pretty popular. They made a lot of money.
So, I mean, that must have been pretty astounding, not seeing, brickweed everywhere anymore. Why do you think that brickweed persisted, well into, the 2000s?
Well, because the cartels are shoddy farmers, to be honest with you. They're not spending money on nutrients. They're not spending money on, pesticides. They're not growing, or they weren't growing, indica strains at all. They were only growing the old school sativas that grew monstrous and didn't have any problems growing there. So for them, it was just a matter of ease of a mass scale operation. And they were, really the main source of all cannabis in America for many, many years. Like I said, up until probably the late 80s when the Southeast, a bunch of farmers in Georgia got into it, in North Florida and Alabama. And so we started seeing that, but it's still, it was Reggie competing with the brickweed that was still around. And it's my understanding it still exists today. I haven't seen any in years, but I know it's out there, I'm told.
All right, so you talked about them not growing any indicas. I guess that sort of leads into the question of how did you get into breeding and learning about manipulating and creating new marijuana genetics.
Well, I had always been interested in that right away because my first grow there were some very different genetics, and it was clear, and I was always a pretty curious guy anyway. So I moved to a place where it was a fairly isolated area, and there was a group of guys who all went to Vietnam together who called themselves a militia, which is really ridiculous because they just hang out and compare weed. But they all brought seeds back from Amsterdam and started growing weed, and they all started breeding and exchanging seeds and pollen amongst themselves. So they kind of developed like Australia. You know, everything was different from everywhere else because it had been, you know, genetically isolated essentially from everything going on in the West Coast and Amsterdam, because they brought these seeds in the 70s. So, you know, in the early 90s, I hooked up. I met these guys, and you know, I started gleaning the best I could off of that. And
Interesting.
shortly after that, you know, real genetics became much easier to get. Although I will say it's only in the last 2-3 years that people have really started to buy seeds through the mail. You know, before it was typically people going to Amsterdam and bringing home a packet of them.
So would you say that the easing up of the laws and like sort of that bringing the community together is accelerating, like, you know, this whole development of genetics and creating superior weed?
Definitely. The seeds I gave away last year at the seed share, you know, if they resulted in 1,000 plants and each of them put out 10 seeds on average, you know, and that continued, I mean, the number's staggering shortly. And you look at the clones I've given out, you know, those have a very good chance of succeeding. And I get pictures all the time and messages from people who are growing my strains, and I can tell you I've given enough of my own strains out now that I've probably made a dent in the gene pool of cannabis, you know, that will probably be around for a very long time.
So, like, how does it feel to be able to come out from the shadows, to be able to bring what you've been spending your life developing to the world?
Well, you know, it's pretty unusual because everything I was doing was kind of, well, maybe someday there'll be money in this, but I never really believed that, you know, I would ever actually get to a point where seeds are legit to sell, and we're still not at that point as free and open as it is now. So, you know, everything I was doing was focused on what am I looking for. You know, you know, I was just breeding for me. What do I want in a plant? So, as it turns out, my taste is pretty similar to the general public.
I guess that's clear to see, considering you won the DC Growers Cup. What can you tell me about the Delano?
It's a very unusual plant. It is the most unique smelling cannabis I've ever seen. I've been looking for a long time. It was actually an accident on the way to something else. I was trying to breed a plant that was, you know, black, and I got pretty close. I have a strain that does it about 20% of the time. The rest of the time it's dark purple. But the Delano was a mistake that happened along the way there, and it's certainly a great one. And it's a very immediate buzz. It's as soon as you blow it out kind of thing. It hits hard, lasts long. The same cut that I used to win that, some B-side buds off of that tested at 19.8%. It was an outdoor auto, so you know, it was pretty nice. You know, it can go pretty high. It's just a great strain because it's pretty hard to kill. It grows anywhere, and, you know, let's face it, burgundy to purple, super stinky weed that brings your bell immediately is in demand everywhere.
So you basically say, like, the Delano is kind of like the culmination of 37 years of studying the plant and growing it.
Yes, I've had it for about 4 years now, and it's something that I had actually worked towards for a while, and like I said, it came up as a secondary to
So I have a question, like, what is, like, the oldest, like, the genetics that you've had your hands on the longest that are in the Delano, or if you'll be able to reveal just one?
There's some G13 and a Delano way back, so I can tell you about that one, and there's also some Schramm in it. But that's, until I either win or lose something substantial with this, I'll keep that classified. But,
so do you?
I'm looking forward to giving the other breeders credit, because you know, it is indeed, you know, me standing on the shoulders of giants. You know, they did all this hard work. I swept, you know, put a few things together and came out with a home run. So, you know, I do look forward to giving them the credit they deserve.
Well, I would think, yeah, all new genetics are a collaborative effort. this point.
Yeah, all genetics are stolen. People that tell you they don't steal genetics are full of it. I mean, nobody's taking just Landress strains and mixing them. You know, if Barney's Farm came out with Tangerine Dream, next year everybody's got Tangerine. They didn't go breed it back from Landress strains. They stole some Barney's, mixed something in it. I mean, that's just how it works. You know, so the only real way to have integrity here is to just give people credit. I mean, you can't give them money out of what you make off of their thing, but you can at least tell the public who's responsible.
Awesome. So do you plan on entering competitions in some of the other legal states like California and Colorado, like the Medical Cup?
Yes, I do want to take the Delano and see how it stacks up against some of the big guys. So far I've competed against 85 strains here and have not been beaten yet. So I'd say we got a pretty good chance.
So you definitely say that DC on the whole is on the come up in terms of quality to be able to compete with what's in the West Coast.
Yes, and that was a big part of what I wanted to do with giving away the seeds and the clones, was I wanted to get enough of a respectable strain out there that's only region specific that we could draw some of the crowd that's buying the cannabis from out west. You know, all the people that are buying Western weed are from the east. The people out west got their own weed, they're not buying it. So, you know, all that money that's getting spent could be spent in staying right here in DC instead of going to Colorado, California, and Washington. So that was kind of my hope, was that I could quickly get us all up to speed so the whole city could make some money.
Awesome.